there you could use it in a footbath, because right now we do run everything through a footbath when they arrive. And it's a dry product. And I went and bought a little oat seeder, put it on the front of a JCB. And once a week now, we'll spread this product over the bed pack. So actually, we're going in there on a preventative basis, and also it's acidic enough, I believe, that's what's keeping this kind of virus under control. And right now, I could say that it's tolerable. I mean, there was a point to where we would pull 60% of the pen with some kind of a foot problem. And you look at what it did to our bottom line when those cattle would go off feed and, not eat. I mean, it was horrible.
Welcome to the Beef Podcast Show, brought to you by Wisenetics. I'm Dr. AJ Tarpoff, and we are dedicated to bringing you the latest insight and discussions from the cattle industry. So sit back, get ready to expand your knowledge with today's episode, and we have a fantastic guest. We're going to be talking about indoor feeding facilities. We're going to talk about some environmental stewardship, kind of wherever the conversation takes us. But I'd like to introduce Bill Couser of Couser Cattle Company out of Iowa. Bill is a cattle and grain farmer from central Iowa. He's a past winner of NCBA's National Environmental Stewardship Award, which is a huge deal, as well as National Award winner for the Beef Quality Assurance Producer Award, which I am very fond of, and I think that's a fantastic piece. Works heavily to be able to be a representative of the cattle industry on some of these environmental concerns within the U.S. cattle industry. He's also, correct me if I'm wrong, but co-founded and is part of operations of several ethanol plants in central Iowa.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, I don't want to get too far in the weeds. I know you do a lot of different things, but you've done a lot for the cattle industry, and it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Bill, welcome.
Thank you very much. Look forward to the conversation.
Well, tell us a little bit more about your operation and in particular, how you've kind of grown and modified your operation of finishing cattle over the years.
Well, it all starts off when you're a kid, and I'll never forget my first calf was named Tony. I was 9 years old. God, that's been 60 some years ago now. But, through that experience and just growing up on a farm and the involvement with some land that we were able to put to pasture and different things there. Started in the beef industry. We had a lot of pigs, a lot of sheep for a while too, but we finally found a way to get rid of that and really get involved in the cattle industry. And the cattle industry, as you well know, it's really about the people. It's some of the greatest people between that and the draft horse industry. They're the greatest people on the face of the earth. And to be able to have friends that you can travel across this country and meet and see and, going to South America a couple of times and being in those feed yards down there, it's just an industry that everybody envies to be a part of. We just, when my dad retired, I continued to grow. Right now we're farming, 6,000 to 7,000 acres and in seed production. When the cattle started, I was fortunate enough when I got out of, I worked for Deere for a few years. I bought a small feed yard that had about 150 head capacity. And today we're permitted for 5,200 one-time capacity, and about 70% of that's under roof. And we decided to make that step. That's a huge step when you look at the investment and everything. And that's one thing when I have people come and look at our feed yard is they ask about, the area we've been, because we started with mounds and, aprons. And then we went to work very closely with Iowa State University, DNR and EPA to do a project called Alternative Technology, where we used BTAs and saturated buffers and settling basins and tried to make it very green, you might say, by growing the grasses and running some of the effluents over them. And that worked fairly well, and we still have that included in the operation. But when land got over $20,000 here, you just can't put a 1,800-pound steer on a $20,000 acre of black dirt, because one thing we say in Iowa here, it's only ankle deep if you go in head first. because that black dirt, it just doesn't support the cattle industry right here. But it does support it if you go with buildings. And our goal was to have an acre for every steer we fed, because we just figured economically that was probably the rule of thumb where I live in this part of the world. You could support an acre with one steer. And so we figured we'd go with the 5,200 at the time, and now we farm a little bit more now. But it was just a great way to grow up through it, grow into it. And like I tell every dad and son that comes here, what's your commitment to this industry? Because if you start with bricks and mortar, you're making a commitment, and you better make sure you have a good business plan, because as we've seen in the last 20 years, this industry is changing again. And where are we going to go from here?
No, I agree with you. There's a lot of changes. You've seen a lot of change, and I almost foresee as much or if not more changes to our cattle industry in the next decade or two to come. It's amazing how quickly a lot of the technology is coming at us. A lot of the different changes are coming at us. But
Jones Hamilton is proud to support this episode and support healthier environments with our pH control product, Surface. Surface controls ammonia, improves air quality, and supports hoof health to create healthier spaces for calves, cows, and the people who care for them. Backed by decades of experience in animal agriculture, Jones Hamilton helps producers leverage the power of pH to support herd health, welfare, and productivity. Learn more at joneshamiltonag.com.
No, I love I love what you've done with kind of growing and developing slowly over time, but you really had to make some big steps. You mentioned the big investment of that indoor feeding facility. I mean, 100%, I agree. You have to have a base for those cattle to stand on, and working off of concrete. When you tell people, it's like, oh, cattle are going to be on a solid floor of concrete or slats or whatever that might be. And people have kind of a misperception of what that means in some circumstances. But they've also never seen them step into a hole with, in their up to their belly in mud. So it really is a trade-off in trying to balance that. So tell us a little bit more about the construction of what you put in originally, and kind of what started that idea. What made you take that extra step to finally say it's time for brick and mortar? Enough of dealing with this mess. We're gonna try something different.
It was probably the winter of 2011. It was horrible here. It got very cold. We had 2 or 3 extremely bad blizzards. Of course, we had, wind fences and wind guards like that. But you just reach a point to where, your frozen hands and trying to keep things alive. And so when we started in this, the other challenge we were up against here in central Iowa is, today we're pushing 300 bushel corn. And, when you start thinking about what direction do I want to go? Do I want to do a mound and aprons? Do I want to do a VTA system? Do I want to do a slatted floor? Do I want to do a deep bedded barn? Our biggest challenge here is pushing 300 bushel corn is the residue that's left over. And when I put my farmer cap on, because, most of us here in this state, we're farmer feeders, because we're full circle. When you think about the manure and the ethanol plants and taking the corn to the ethanol plant, it's just kind of a full circle, trying to walk our crop to town, you might say. Getting rid of some of that residue, it was a challenge. And how do you manage it? And so working with Iowa State University and John Deere Machinery Company, we developed a baler called a single pass baler. And we were able to take, basically, if you can take 50% of that residue off your farming land, off the corn ground, you can basically cut your nutrients down some, because it takes nutrients in the soil to break all that residue down. So we saw a huge savings there. So by the single pass baler, we worked with the veterinary and also the agronomy side of Iowa State University. We found that pulling a baler behind the combine and just taking what went through the combine was a heck of a feed supply for us, because the thing we found out that in that bale, there was 7% residue of starch. So they call it phantom loss. So all of a sudden we picked up a feed stuff. So we don't chop silage between bean straw and corn that goes the stuff that just goes through the combine, because the stalk went on the ground. The stalk does not go through the combine, and that's basically the part of the plant that's not digestible. And so by having a feed stuff there now with the cob, the leaf, and some of the shuck, why all of a sudden we had something that worked just as well as silage. And we were able to utilize that 7% loss that was basically gone. And we were able to cut our input costs on our acre of land as far as nutrients to feed that next cross. And then you put that in with the manure, balance all that out. All of a sudden we had a win-win situation, but that committed me to a deep bedded barn. So I was looking at we already had all the machinery to haul solid manure. And if I was going to go to a pitted barn, we were going to have to come up with a whole nother line of machinery. And we weren't going to really solve the problem of the residue that was in the fields. So that's why we decided to go the deep bedded barn. Granted, we put up a lot of bales, but in the other hand, it complements what I'm trying to do on the agronomy side and also on the livestock side.
Now the bed, explain a little bit that this is a concrete floor that you manage a deep bed, a bedding pack. So the cattle actually aren't walking on concrete, that there is a bedding pack on there that you continually manage and work over that entire year. And then you have to go in and clean it all out and do those things, but they're not standing on concrete. They're standing on a bedded, padded location that you are actively managing.
Yeah, what we try to do is working with Dr. Ingleton and Dr. Grant here at Iowa State University, we found the magic number of 51 square feet per animal in a pen is the adequate number. That's the number that you're searching for. So that being said, then we start with a bedding pack that is about 2 feet deep of corn stalks. Every week we clean 12 feet clear around that pen. So right now the pen size of one of the barns is 100 by 73. So it's 100 feet wide, 73 feet deep, and we clean around the outside. What we found through a lot of trials was that, and we never clean the bed pack completely out. We just keep adding to it, because what we found is you put a 7-weight steer in this bed pack at 51 square feet. As you add bedding, the pack gets taller. It grows in size. As soon as that animal reaches 1,100 pounds, the footprint becomes a lot harder, so that pack starts to push down and push out. Well, what we found is we're actually going through kind of a mini composting, because we never clean out the bed pack, and what you're getting is a mixture of the whole thing that's kind of gone through some time, decay and whatever, and it's all the same analysis. And it's very easy to calculate, because now all of a sudden you have a product that's very valuable, and we're able to take and know what's in every pound of that as far as the analysis, and apply that to our cropping system. So when we were back in you might say the outside pens, you might get a bucket of snow, you might get a bucket of dirt, you might get a bucket of soup, whatever, when you're trying to haul, and it was never consistent when you went out to the agronomy side of your farming operation. So now all of a sudden we have something that's very consistent. The analysis is runs about 25, 25, 25, so you know exactly what to put on that land. And but it creates some issues when you get some really wet weather stuff. Sometimes it takes more bedding. When you get in a dry situation, it takes less bedding. So you really have to. It's like everything else. You have to be able to manage that barn and the system that you put together.
I can absolutely see the positive benefits from the agronomic perspective. I can absolutely see the positive benefits from some of the extreme weather. You mentioned, the winter of 2011, where we've had some very extreme mud and things like that we're getting cattle out of that type of environment, especially when there's not a bottom. In central Iowa, and you say it's ankle deep when you dive in head first. Well, I mean, there may not be a legitimate bottom whenever you finally hit bedrock. So it is so deep that there's not a base, there's not a bottom. But now you've provided that structure.
And I think one thing, not to interrupt, but I think one thing that's probably the most important aspect that happened here, the environmental aspect of it, because, I'll be the first one to say, and I'm probably going to have somebody throw something at me. This industry was very challenged, the 60s, 70s, and 80s, because we all built these feedlots on the side of a hill. We used the flush system. When it rained, she went downhill, she went in the creek, and away we go. And I look at this industry in Iowa today, and I am really proud of the livestock industry here, because now it's about environmental, and we've stopped all that stuff. And, I'll never forget, I had one of my DNR guys come out for an inspection one day, and he says, "You know what you got in these creeks today you didn't have 30 years ago?" I go, "What?" He goes, "Fish." And, you don't think about that until all of a sudden, look what we've done as producers to be able to, help manage these systems and get them back to where they need to be, and the health and productivity of the animal.
From the positives, were there some challenges that you didn't recognize up front that you had to overcome whenever you moved into some of these covered indoor feeding facilities?
Oh, very much so. Feeding on aprons and dirt mounds, it all seems to be the health issue. And I think the biggest challenge we've got in any livestock industry, whether it's feathers, pigs, or cattle, feet. We've fed cattle all over the United States, and it's a lot different feeding a steer on a dirt mound versus feeding a steer on a slat versus feeding a steer on solid concrete. It all has to do with their legs and their feet, because there's certain traits in some of these animals where, especially you get into the simmentals and the high-strung animals, they can't stand on a slat more than, 60, 90 days, and you better be looking for a market for them, because their feet just give out. And then the other thing is some of the health issues. You're in a building, so ventilation is so important. Do you have the right fans? Are you using the right bedding pack? Are you using the right stuff for your bedding? A lot of that boils down to, then you go back to the nutritional side. Depending on what you're feeding and whether that steer's standing out with his butt in the wind and the snow on his back, or whether he's in a building, the energy that you might and how you change that ration to fit the environment. So every aspect and every way, like I say, when you go into the cattle industry, nobody does it the same. I mean, you have to take your specific area, your specific system, your feedstuffs, and also the team you've got around you. What veterinarians are you working with? What's their idea, and what do they like to do? Because and the feed stuff's available. So you've got a whole team that you need to surround yourself. If you think you're the smartest guy in the world, you better go just pay your bank off and go on vacation for a while, because it'll eat you.
Well, so let's dive into some of the lameness and some of the feet concerns. When you went to more of a, I see it every year whenever we get really muddy in outdoor feeding environments. When we get really muddy or we get really dry, we end up with more infectious feed issues, whether it's foot rot, hairy heel, some of those concerns. But there's a pretty big seasonality with it. When you move into a deep bedding pack, does that change, or are there similar or different concerns when it comes just to foot health?
Well, I think one of the things that we've learned is that through the, my 50 years of feeding, 60 years, whatever how old I am now, but everything has changed a little bit. We talked about when syncytial virus hit, back in the 90s. I mean, I think we were the first one to get it, and we got it horribly. It was just, the mental part of losing livestock like that, healthy livestock that quickly. And I think, when you look at what's happened now with the dairy industry, who I think has probably started this, the hairy heel wart that came in, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, we thought we were treating foot rot. And, thank goodness, probably the number one person on my team is the relationship I have with Iowa State University and our veterinarians there. And they came out, and we have kids out here all the time because I think it's truly important that these kids going to school get on these feed yards or these cow herds and get some manure under their fingernails and get kicked once or twice and feel the pain. But all of a sudden we found out that we were chasing a hairy heel wart infection, and we didn't quite know how to handle it. And so working with Dr. Terry Ingleton and the staff over there, we've done, I don't know how many biopsies on different feet and, trying to chase that virus down and what works, what doesn't work. We've wrapped feet, we've treated with different antibiotics, we put stuff in the feed, and all of a sudden we came across a company called Surefire product, where we've also have foot baths. We've used
lime.
Well, yes, we did try lime, but now we're using the copper sulfate.
Oh, formalin. You're talking about formalin for some of the foot baths.
Yeah, for the foot baths, and of course I tried to kill everybody because all of a sudden the fumes come up and kids are running out of the building and their eyes are watering and they can't breathe. And so we finally started with copper sulfate, and then we came across a company that wanted to try using this. It's called Surefire. And so there you could use it in a foot bath, because right now we do run everything through a foot bath when they arrive. And it's a dry product, and I went and bought a little oat seeder, put it on the front of a JCB, and once a week now we'll spread this product over the bed pack. So actually we're going in there on a preventative basis, and also it's acidic enough, I believe, that's what's keeping this kind of virus under control. And right now I could say that it's tolerable. I mean, there was a point to where we would pull 60% of the pen with some kind of a foot problem. And you look at what it did to our bottom line when those cattle would go off feed and, not eat. I mean, it was horrible. And so my hat's really off to my number one team player, my quarterback at the college here, that we went through 2 or 3 years of this, what works the best, different foot baths, different ways to apply this. How often do you apply it? Because there's an economic side to this too, that, how much is too much, and where can we get by and make sure that it's affordable and it doesn't really affect that cost of gain. And now I was just talking to a feedlot manager here this morning about this, and he says we're down to about 0.4% pulls on hairy heel wart. So, it's taken a few years to get there, but it's really fun to be able to talk to producers that, oh my God, I got foot rot so bad. I just want to say, I think you better get a hold of your veterinarian and see if you're really chasing foot rot, because I think you got something else that's come in there, and I mean, it'll just cut your head off. And all of a sudden, your sick barn is full, and you're taking another pen to be able to put cattle in, and the lameness, it's just horrible. But anyway, I think we've kind of got that under control. It's been great working with this company, and I hope more producers will think about this. And I know you guys as veterinarians know what we're doing here. We now have the research. It's like syncytial virus. It took a while to get our arms around it, but finally we know the kind of the dog we're chasing.
And the company is Jones Hamilton. We've had him on the podcast before, and that product that you're applying, it's an acidifying agent, which is novel, especially for the cattle industry. That instead of alkalying some of those things, we're lowering the pH and kind of shocking, the bacterial population within that bedding pack. And it's great to hear from somebody that's had those continuous issues, has utilized something that has helped within a management. And like you mentioned, it's not a flip a switch, everything, solves itself. It's not a magic bullet. It has to be incorporated into your management program over time to be able to see some of those results. And something you hit on, anybody listening in that may not have had, hopefully you never have to deal with hairy heel warts, but just what you said, if you think it's foot rot, it's non-responsive, there's no swelling of the foot, but extremely painful lame animals. And just like you said, they end up with an entire pen or a sick pen or a chronic pen full of these lame animals, that's not normal, right? Call for help, call your veterinarian, make sure you have the accurate diagnosis, because this is a very different disease process compared to foot rot. And no, I'm glad that you're not alone. A lot of operators throughout the United States and North America have been battling this issue, but it's good to hear folks that have taken it seriously, getting on top of it, and are truly trying to manage their way out of it. And it sounds like you've done a fantastic job at that.
Well, when you look at, we talk about the industry changing again, I never thought that the dairy industry would be this close to the feedlot industry now. I mean, all of a sudden we got this beef on dairy. I mean, it's huge here in this part of the state, these calves that we're feeding and the performance that we're getting. And, who would have thought 50 years ago that, the real cattle guys, the cowboys, would never talk to a dairy guy. But all of a sudden now, I mean, we're married at the hip because, it's just part of this industry.
And just going forward, I mean, that I see it very similarly. It doesn't matter if you're in Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, Texas. Those animals are not going away. I think they're just going to get more fine-tuned because that has turned and developed into a profit center for the dairy industry. And we're going to continue to work better to make those lines even better.
And, as we see this industry changing, and I've spent enough time in Brazil, they're changing fast, and they're going to eat our lunch if we don't step up in this country and change along with this. We can't fight it. We've got to be able to compete with exports that are coming in. Now, granted, we need some of that export, but we've got to make sure our pencil's pretty sharp because these countries around us are going to eat our lunch.
Well, looking at just the operations kind of economics, what do you see changing in the next year to 5 years other than the cattle cycle? Is there anything else big that you're looking at the horizon that maybe you're planning ahead for?
Well, I'm concerned. I grew up in the farmer feeder era. And, you drive around this county, you always saw a pen of steers, you saw a building of chickens, you saw some sheep and pigs. We used to have fences. You don't know what a fence is in Story County. I mean, our fence is the next bean field that's next to the cornfield. You drive around this state now and you see a lot of silos sitting around with nothing around them other than somebody's mowing the yard around them. I see an industry that this is how a kid grows up. You got a pony, you got a calf, and you got a pig, and you take them to 4-H. I see that changing, and I just look at the people side of it, how it's going to change. When you drive around this country, you just don't see. You got to drive quite a ways to see a calf in a pen. Now, granted, our pastures are still pretty well utilized, but one of my goals is how do we turn CRP into a grazing product? How do we work with the government? And that's one reason I stay so involved with EPA and Environmental Defense Fund is there's ways out there that we can rent back or however we do this with the government. We've got EQIP funds today now to get water in it. We've got EQIP funds to do fencing around it. And I also believe that today for a young person to get into the farming side or the grazing side is if we could develop a way to be able to work the CRP to get a young family to buy a few cows. That's how most people got started. I got started with 24 cows, 55 years ago. And that's what gave me my footing. And I still think there's an opportunity for young people to get in starting that direction. But we just need to get the policies and the rules and regulations. And it's not too late. Some of the CRP is going to come out again as soon as these markets turn around, like it always does. But I'm just saddened by the fact that we don't see the farmer feeder industry now. We see, and I'm not saying we did it right, but I just see buildings going up in certain places. The great thing I see about the buildings is you've got a legacy going on. My sons have come back, and we're going to continue that legacy. But it's a high dollar stakes game today. It used to be we could get by on a $500,000 note. Now you're looking at, in the millions that you have to be able to work that. So it just takes it's a different way of life today. But if you're in it, I tell you what, you're always going to make it back on the next pen, though. I promise you. If you lose money, it will always be the next pen that will make you money. Don't give up. I guess that's what I say. We've been through many challenges. Sleepless nights. Laying on a 20 below zero floor, pulling a calf from a feedlot heifer. We've all been there. But I tell you what, it's the greatest industry in the world.
I agree 100% that, and back to your economics, you can always make it back on the next pen. I heard from a feedlot owner that he goes, no. He goes, you got to look at profitability over a 10-year period. If you're still around after that period, you're doing fantastic. But the day-to-day, that's the tough one. Don't get caught up in the daily.
I get caught by my lender. He goes, you got a little more death loss this year. I said, no, that's locker loss. That's just locker loss. That's not death loss.
Yeah.
It's time for our famous three.
Still delegating work to someone who hasn't adapted to AI? You don't need another assistant stuck in 2015. You need a remote AI specialist who can handle inboxes, research, reporting, ops, admin, sales support, and marketing, using tools like ChatGPT, Claude, OpenClaw, and automations. Wise VAs connects you with AI-trained Latin talent in your time zone at up to 80% less than a US AI hire. Schedule your free strategy call at www.wisevas.io.
Well, that's great. Bill, this has been a fantastic conversation. And thank you so much for coming on the Beef Podcast Show, but I cannot let you go yet. Every guest that we bring on, we always ask them three pretty similar questions. And we talked about it just before the podcast and kind of already agreed to these, but let's dive into these three questions. Number one, what is your go-to or your favorite cattle-related resource?
Well, I have to go to probably my nutritionist and my veterinarian. They have to be your best friend. That's, I remember, we started 20 some years ago in the ethanol industry. Nobody knew what distillers grains was in central Iowa, so first, all of a sudden you've got a pen of steers walking around like they're drunk. Well, guess what? You put too much syrup because it was cheap, and I thought, boy, I'm going to really cut a fat hog on this. They have to be part of your team when you're going. I mean, you can read all the stuff in the world, but to look in the veterinarian's eyes and he's chewing your ass out about something because you did this and you didn't talk to him first, it comes to real light. So to me, it's that team that you've got around you that, I'm a diesel mechanic and an engineer by education. I never in my wildest dreams thought I was going to feed cattle for a living. And I knew absolutely nothing about the belly of a steer, so I'll quit there.
No, that's fair. I love it. But you're 100% right. Having a team, having people that you trust, having people that buy into your operation, they're a part of your success. So no, I think you're spot on with that. Question number two: what are you diving into, or what's your favorite thing to do outside of work, outside of feeding cattle or farming? What's your favorite thing going on in your life right now?
Well, 4 years ago, my wife gave me an ultimatum, and she goes, Billy, we've been in this for 50 years, and you do chores on weekends because you let all the guys go home, and plus, I really enjoyed it, but she gave me two options, and I didn't have the guts to tell her I was going to miss her. So I kind of turned the operation over to another young family relation. And so I'm kind of I guess you'd call a counselor now or whatever. And I got mauled pretty bad by a steer here a few years ago. And he was just pissed. He got me in a bunk. And, when you see the snot going by your face, you're kind of in trouble. And so you hear the ribs snap. But I got online that night for some silly reason, and somebody was giving a beehive away. And this is 4 years ago. I went and picked it up, and by that night, I had 3 more. I was so excited about it. And today, I think we've got 150 hives, and we got into the bee business, and I'm allergic to bees. I mean, you do stupid things. Stupid people do stupid things, and And so I'm a terrible salesman, and I think the greatest thing today is I belong to the Legion in our local thing. I'm a Legion writer, so we do all the funerals and freedom flights and stuff. We've set up scholarship funds in 2 different legions, and we give the honey to them. And we have scholarships for veterans' kids now. So it's really exciting, and you don't have to be a Legion member to do it, but it's really exciting to be able to sell the honey through our local legions and announce those kids, once a year who need a scholarship. So it's been a thrill. It's just totally been a thrill. And what else are you going to do with a 500-gallon of honey? I mean, geez.
Well, I know what I'm going to do next time I get up into your area. Make sure I stop off and buy some of that honey. Oh, that's good. No, yeah, you got to love beehives. Like, you got a cattle feeder that's now taking care of hives. I love it. So number 3, our final question as we wrap up the podcast. What does it take to succeed and thrive in the livestock industry?
I can hit that spot on. A few years ago, I was asked to give the commencement speech at a college, and boy, you sit there and think. And the greatest advice I can give to somebody today is learn to fail gracefully. This is a tough business, and I don't care what business you're in, but every once in a while, you're going to lay down at night and you're not going to be able to close your eyes. And you gotta make sure you got the big guy upstairs on your side. Talk to him every day, but learn to fail gracefully. Pick your ass up, get on the horse. You got bucked off. You might get bucked off again, but surround yourself with a team that I've always told people I'm not very smart, but I've learned to surround myself with people that understand the direction I want to go, the things I want to do. It's like when we built our first ethanol plant. Here's 3 guys sitting around a table having a beer going, gee, we should build an ethanol plant. Yeah, right. And now we've got 3 of them. But I didn't know the first thing about it. Neither did the other guys. So learn to fail gracefully, but make sure you surround yourself with people that have the same vision as you do. And don't be afraid to get your face slapped, but challenge them.
It's okay to push the envelope, right?
Yeah. As long as your wife kind of agrees,
Well, you always have to have the home team on board with these big decisions.
Yeah. So no, it's a tremendous industry. My biggest challenge today is I'm old enough. I'm afraid I'm going to miss all the fun.
Well, it sounds like you've already had a lot of fun, and don't worry, there's still a lot of fun to be had.
As long as I got a motorcycle or we can keep doing RAGBRAI, by God, we're going to do her.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, Bill, thank you very much for coming on as a guest to the Beef Podcast Show. So again, folks listening in, Bill Couser, Central Iowa, innovator, award winner, great cattle feeder, and a friend. We haven't talked. We before the podcast, we always thought that we had met each other, but it's good to get on the podcast and have an opportunity to chat. Thank you very much for coming on today.
Thank you.
And signing off, this is AJ Tarpoff with the Beef Podcast Show, brought to you by Genetics. Make sure that you tune in and listen to the next episode, and hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you.
See ya.